But if you don't know where the stresses are coming from, it's really hard to fight with them. You end up with generic prescriptions, and it's like because you don't know where it's coming from. So my insight occurred a long time ago, 20, 25 years ago. And as a doctor, I'm used to writing prescriptions, and the prescriptions will say, "Hey, here's a medicine for your blood pressure, your diabetes. It's a great medicine, but it could have a side effect. It might make you a little dizzy, might give you skin rash, whatever, might make your muscle ache." So then when I started looking into the brain and how the brain works, what I was doing is able to separate out, here's a brain skill that we share with other animals, but here's the mind skills that we only have as humans. So like say, look at one of the skills of envisioning the future. So it's an amazing skill that we have. So we can say, hey, tomorrow, in an hour from now, 20 years from now, 1,000 years from now, we have that ability. But then when I looked at it and said, okay, well, here's this great skill. Oh, but it has a side effect. So the side effect is you have to worry about it. Now, my grandson, who's a year old, actually just turned 2, doesn't have the skill of envisioning the future yet. He's developing it, but it's not very good. So he doesn't sit at the breakfast table and look at his father and say, Dad, how am I going to pay for college? Because it doesn't even come up. He doesn't have that skill. So worry isn't one of his, he doesn't have the side effect because he doesn't have the skill. At the other end of the spectrum are my 85-year-old demented patients who used to have the skill, but they lost it. And so now they can't envision the future either. So guess what? They don't worry. They don't sit around going, hey, who's going to pay for my nursing home when I get to that point, right? So what I see then is if you then see as our stresses as side effects to our skills, then the first step is going, yay, I got these skills. Yay, not everybody has these skills. And two, then you start going, okay, well, if it's a side effect, how do I keep the skill and lose the side effect?
That's uh, when you talk about these that perspective. I mean, it is a gift to be able to see in the future, and it's also kind of this curse, both from again, like as I mentioned earlier, these evolutionary principles. Is I always think, okay, if there's something that's hurting us, it had to have some sort of evolutionary purpose. Obviously, seeing the future is a powerful way to survive and everything.
Yeah.
And then and then and what's funny about the a lot of I joke about it too because my mother has dementia and I always I want to be present. I'm pretty deep into Buddhist psychology and philosophy just
Okay.
as like I, I read it. I was just like, this stuff makes sense. It's compatible with my worldview on so many levels that I really try to be present, and it's very difficult for me. And I joke about my mother's just wow, she's present. At the same time, of
Yeah.
course, she can't really function in society where she had to do things. But um, I'm
That's
wondering if
exactly.
how that like mindfulness and being in the present is popular and there's that's kind of the opposite of it. Where does
Well,
this
this
play in?
this is the point that I'm trying to make. So if you listen to Buddhism, and not that I mean, Buddhism has a lot of great points,
Mhm.
and psychologists have a lot of great points, but what they say is live for today. And you're like, wait, first off, it's impossible when you're a human, when you have a mind and you can envision the future. So it's literally impossible to live for today. And second off, why would I want to give up my greatest skill because it has a side effect? How about I give up the side effect and keep the skill?
Sure.
So those were those tools that I have in the book.
Yeah.
And what they try to do is say, like, I want to be able to live in all three tenses of my life, my past, my present, and my future. And I want them to all be in part of my happy place. And so there's ways to do that where you can keep the skill and not have to lose it just because it has a side effect. So the two skills that I talk about are one is what I call realistic optimism. Well, first I start off with like a lot of my patients will come and say, I worry that I worry too much. And you're like, well, then that probably means you do worry too much, right? But then when I say to them, tell me what worry is, they have a hard time defining it. And it's a word they use, they know really well, we know what it feels like. But when you start trying to define it, it's not as easy as people think. So I've in one of the when I talk about understanding includes having a really concrete definition. So I'm not sitting here going, oh, let's look into my crystal ball. And no, this is like, no, here's the definition. Worry is I'm envisioning the future. I focus on all the bad things that can happen, and then I have a fear reaction right now. That's worry. Okay. So if that's worry, then what tools can we use to make that not happen? So first off, we go, hey, I can still look into the future. Yay for me, right? Second is, well, I have a choice. So I can choose to focus on the negative things that occur, or I can choose to focus on the positive things. So if I focus on the positive things, well, that makes me feel good right now. As opposed if I go, oh, the world's going to end, well, that makes me feel bad. Why would I want to write a book if the world's going to end, right? So I'm going to focus on the world's doing much better and we're going to have a good time. So yeah, it's worth writing this book because I want everybody in their happy place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And uh yeah, I'm in this kind of this Buddhist zone, but are you familiar with the analogy of the two arrows?
Do the two what?
The two arrows where the first getting shot with two arrows, the first arrow is what life throws at us, the unavoidable pain and challenges, but the second arrow is our reaction to it, the mental and
Oh, absolutely.
emotional suffering. And that kind of sounds like that reaction to it is the worry is I'm seeing it is it like as a byproduct. I mean, you say side effect, is that kind of like a it's not necessary that first arrow can come. There's no reason to also be burdened by our reaction to it. Is that
Well, so one of the problems I have with Buddhism is when he says, well, because we have desires, we suffer. So
Mhm.
basically saying the same thing I'm saying, which is because we have desires, the side effect of we have to suffer. So what he says then is give up the desires so then you don't suffer. But I'm like, no, but I like desires. They're
yeah,
really good, right? So isn't there a way I can keep my desires and not and get rid of the suffering? And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like I like being able to envision the future. So I want to be able to live in that tense. It's a big part of my world. I just want to get rid of the side effect of worry, but you have to know what it is first to do that. And I think, and this is where I would disagree with Buddha, great teachings, but I think that I don't want to have to give up the skill because it has a side effect. I just want to give up the side effect.
yeah. I mean, I think from Buddha's perspective, is you're giving up the attachments is what it
Yes.
ultimately is, and those attachments are desires. But um, the I there's actually an area that I usually save for the end of my podcast, but it's actually because it's my project that's like a side project. It has nothing to do with uh my guest. However, in this case, it's very relevant. So I'd like to kind of bring it up now.
Do
It's a
it.
book that I'm working on myself. It's going to be How to Live for the Death You Hope to Have. And at first glance, that might think, well, I don't hope to die, but it's not. The premise isn't that you hope to die, it's but that the premise is you are going to die, and
Yeah.
then therefore, I would want to have the best death possible. So then I start creating. Okay, what would my ideal death look like? And it initially begins by kind of stripping away those things we don't want, which I came across in interviews that I was doing actually from my dissertation. But this is kind of a side project that actually I've become more engaged in, and that just became an academic pursuit. And this is kind of where I'm trying to actually envision. At first started for myself, but then I realized like, hey, this I thought I was just kind of crazy and weird. That's what people were saying. Actually, this makes sense. I think everybody could apply this, and it kind of makes the bridge from living in the present. And what I guess the point now is this is like my extreme future. This is literally the culmination of my entire life is my death. And if I can envision this ideal death, within that ideal death is kind of packed into all of my desires. So there's a bucket list in there. There's I don't want to die with the resentments and regrets and shame and
Yeah.
all of these things. So I start actually creating all those things that I want to have achieved or have when I die, and then it actually creates this sense now that I'm really comfortable living in the present because at least I'm just kind of uh, putting my life towards that. Again, who knows what's going to happen if I achieve my ideal death? Doesn't actually matter. I mean, that's just what what it
Yeah. There's
actually is.
always.
This is actually a way to live in the present. I'm wondering if this is. I feel like it's congruent with what you're saying. I'm taking a different perspective, but sorry, I'm just rambling hard. But as I mentioned, I'm in the jungles of Thailand, about an
No,
hour
I
away
get
from Chiang
that. It's-
Mai, where there's any native English
Yeah.
speakers. So this is my chance to get some intellectual stimulation. So take the floor,
Let's do
please.
it. So, a couple things that I would say. First off, isn't it amazing that you can envision the future and your own death? It's actually a difficult thing. No other animal has this. Like my dog does not sit around going, "Hey, what's my life going to be like? Because when I die," no, they don't have that. So it actually is incumbent on us as humans to figure out a way to deal with our future because our future includes our death. And if you're going, well, I'm going to die anyway, so what's the point? Well, then why live, right? So you have to go, you have to be able to say, yes, I'm going to die at some point, but it's okay because all these other things are going to happen in the meantime. So we have to figure out a way to deal with future in a more constructive way because here's the key. Future for humans is so real that it's literally a part of our environment. So it's not like some made up thing. No, it's so real. It's a part of our environment, which is why I see like a friend of mine's in the process of getting divorced.
Mhm.
She's really upset. And I'm like, why upset? Well, I envisioned this life of this, that. It was so real that when she didn't have it anymore, that was a loss to her. So she's grieving the loss of the future that she had envisioned,
Yeah,
right?
wow,
So
that's
that's
powerful.
how real it is to us.
Mhm.
So we have to figure out a way to deal with it. We can't just say, no, we don't have future. We're just going to live for today because you can't. Just as you say, you know you're going to die somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
Second, and this is something that I've put into this has been part of the work that I do here is has turned into some philosophy, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that I talk about, so Buddha talks about enlightenment and Christianity talks about heaven, and so does Muslim and Judaism and Hindu has these other places where you go, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, you know what? I don't know where we go when we die. No, nobody knows where we go, right?
Mhm.
But what I do know is that the memory of us remains. And so I call that a collective consciousness.
Okay.
So that we're all during our life contributing to collective consciousness.
Yeah.
And so when we die, what's still around is that, right? So whatever we've contributed to collective consciousness is going to outlive us. And so what I've seen is when you contributed to collective consciousness, the power that's in there
Mhm.
can change the world. So you look at Buddha, and he lived 2,000 years ago, and he's still changing people's lives now
Mhm.
just through his writings and his teachings. That collective conscious contribution was incredibly powerful. Jesus the same way, Muhammad the same way. These people are changing lives thousands of years later because of what they contributed to collective consciousness. So each one of us is contributing to that, and what you contribute is important. So if you're Hitler and you contributed like negativity, he's if you're Judas, I feel bad for Judas. I think he had a bad rap, but it's like you wouldn't name your kid Judas because of what happened to him, and not because he's still alive anymore, but because of what his contribution to the collective consciousness was.
Yeah.
So that is critical, right? Then the third thing, and I think you actually touched on what I'm talking about. So when I did my worry organizer,
Mhm.
basically what the worry organizer does is says, let's envision the future, but you have to be realistic about it because there are bad things that can happen.
Sure.
So how can we envision the future? And here's the key: plan, but without fear. And so the worry organizer is that tool. So it says, what are you worried about? So, like in your case, I would say you're worried about dying, but without some of these things being done.
Sure. Yeah.
And why are you worried about that? Well, because I've seen other people die all of a sudden and, or they didn't have a purpose in their life. And so they were, yeah, I'm worried about it. So then the thing is, well, how likely is it that I'm going to die without having fulfilled the things that I wanted to get done? Well, not that likely if I have a plan and I know what I'm doing, right? And
Mhm.
I'm doing this concretely. And then the next piece is, well, if I don't finish, well, how bad is it going to be? And what you just said is like, well, it's not going to be that bad. I mean, there's things I want to get done and things I want to accomplish and things. But if I don't, I don't, right? It's just a
Mhm.
goal that I have. So then the next category would be, well, what can I do to get it done? So you've already done